I work at a big company, you know. I can work enough for both of us, so no worries.
Kenneth had said that during our engagement, but as soon as we got married, he changed his tune. He and Matthew would hurl insults at me daily. On top of that, he managed the money himself and skimped on living expenses. He'd complain nonstop, even though he let me do the cooking. Fed up, I declared divorce to Kenneth and left the house. Later, I bumped into Matthew by chance.
Hey, heard you're getting TANF now.
I was surprised. Huh? You must be mistaking me for someone else.
Don't put on airs.
Matthew smirked.
Listen, we're estranged, okay? Don't come crying to me about having no money. I won't lend you a dime. Remember that.
As I opened my mouth to retort, he had already disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling the stares of passers-by, my shoulders shaking. I couldn't suppress my laughter. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he learns the truth. I'm Hannah, a 50-year-old housewife. I married Kenneth 5 years ago. When we met, Kenneth was the picture of a fine young man. We met at a gathering of acquaintances, and I found him fun to talk to and very friendly. As we parted, he said,
I want to meet just the two of us next time.
Feeling sad about saying goodbye, I agreed. When we started dating, he mentioned having a son named Matthew with his ex-wife, who was then in 5th grade. We dined together a few times. He was a bright and pleasant boy, just like his dad. A year later, on the night Kenneth proposed, I took a leap and opened up. You know, I live with my parents while working part-time, right? The company I joined right after graduating was a black company, and it wrecked my health.
Is that so?
It was tough to quit, too. I think long hours will be difficult for me in the future. Then, Kenneth smiled kindly.
Don't worry about it. Just stay at home. Look, I work at a big company. I can work enough for both of us.
Relieved by his words, I accepted his proposal. I was glad to have met a good man and believed we were starting a happy married life. I never imagined tasting despair in less than half a year. As we got used to living as a family of 3, Kenneth and Matthew's attitudes changed drastically. They started ridiculing my actions and words in a light tone.
Mom, are you bedridden again? Where's my sandwich?
Matthew frowned discontentedly as he came into the bedroom before school. I had participated in weeding at a nearby park yesterday and felt ill. It was an unusually hot day, and I had felt unwell since the day before. I had asked Kenneth, but he refused with an irritated look.
Being a housewife must be nice. Slacking off all year? I need my days off, you know? Let me rest.
Okay. Unable to get up the next morning due to pushing myself, I apologized to Matthew. Sorry, Matthew, I couldn't prepare your sandwich, so buy one at the grocery store. Handing him money, Matthew grumbled.
Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom, if you can't even cook.
His words stung.
Don't blame Mom, Matthew.
Kenneth joined in with a half smile as he passed the hallway.
Since you skimped on the sandwich, tonight's dinner must be lavish. Oh, is that so? Then I'll look forward to it. Being a housewife, you should have plenty of time for dinner, right? You're not sleeping until the evening, are you? Make sure to clean thoroughly, without slacking.
The two of them nonchalantly laughed at my poor condition, dropping their insensitive lines before leaving. As if I could prepare a lavish meal. Lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I let out a heavy sigh. Because Kenneth is an extreme penny pincher. Despite being a section chief at a big company and earning a high salary, the living expenses he gave me were ridiculously low.
It's my salary, so why should my wife manage it?
After we married, Kenneth insisted on this, and I, not opposing, meekly followed. I believed it didn't matter who managed the finances as long as it was done properly. Then Kenneth got carried away and started spending money as he pleased. It's necessary for work. Drinking expenses are business expenses. It's essential. Using such reasons as an excuse, he would buy expensive clothes and watches for himself, but make a sour face even when I bought cheap snacks. Since he insisted that a housewife doesn't need an allowance, I had to report to Kenneth and get permission to spend money whenever I went to the hair salon or bought clothes. One pair of jeans is enough, isn't it? You're buying more? I want a warm pair for winter. Fine. Buy them at a cheap store. I also want to get a haircut. Can I go to the hair salon once every 2 months to maintain my hairstyle? Huh? What's the point of you trying to be fashionable? If you keep your hair long, you only need to cut it once every 6 months. I won't allow haircuts. That's why I'm only allowed to buy cheap makeup from drugstores. I want to switch to something better because it's rough on my skin. But he won't listen. Moreover, the living expenses he gives are a third of the average. Within this budget, our nutrition will be unbalanced. I lamented, to which Kenneth responded with a raised chin. On that TV savings show, they managed to live on this amount. They had a farmer-in-law providing vegetables and bread. It's impossible with these high prices. That's your job to manage. I was distressed by the thriftiness in living expenses, but what I couldn't stomach was about the wreath for Dad's funeral. When Dad, who had been ill, passed away, and it was time to send a wreath, Kenneth visibly grimaced. We don't need to send a wreath for the funeral, right? Anyone attending the funeral, other than the chief mourner, should send one. Really? Then use your savings. It's none of my business. He said this to me as I prepared for the funeral with tears in my eyes. His utter lack of concern infuriated me. I never planned to ask you for it, so don't worry. Good. But do Matthew and I really have to go? Our long weekend will be ruined, and I hate that. Right, Dad. I had plans to play a new game. Although they grumbled, I never doubted they would come. However, Kenneth and Matthew arrived late, barely greeting my mom and relatives, and left swiftly. My exhausted mom didn't seem to have the energy to blame them, but my relatives were furious. What's the meaning of this, Kenneth? Your wife's father died, and you're too cold? Matthew, you've received so many gifts and allowances from Hannah's dad. While I apologized to my relatives, I felt my love for the two of them rapidly cooling. Kenneth, always in stylish suits with a refreshing aura, and Matthew attending a prestigious university. Well regarded as a handsome father and son in the neighborhood, they only hurled insults at me at home. They wouldn't come straight home after work or school, wandering around and returning with lipstick and perfume scents. Despite doing as they pleased, they treated me like a housekeeper, demanding lavish meals with a meager food budget. Lately, when I served dishes with chicken or pork, both would glare at me with disdain and hurl insults. Don't you want to serve your husband good food after he returns from work? If I get sick from eating this poor food, how will you take responsibility? Are you even a mom? I can make delicious meals, even with chicken or pork. Besides, disliking vegetables and fish, you'll get sick with such a picky diet. I'm saying I'd eat, if it were high quality. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us. I don't need advice from someone as frail as you. They used to eat while complaining, but lately, they just leave the food untouched. Yet, if I don't cook, are you slacking off even though you're a wife? They would yell. I eat the leftovers for breakfast or lunch the next day. But tears well up, wondering for whom I'm cooking. As for their meals, they subsist on store-bought sandwiches, instant ramen, and snack foods. Eventually, Kenneth was diagnosed as pre-diabetic and a company health check, and Matthew started gaining weight. It was an inevitable outcome. Then they lashed out at me.
What kind of wife makes her husband and child sick? We don't need a useless person like you. We're getting a divorce.
Then I'll leave. They were surprised when I agreed easily.
Are you sure? You're unemployed. You've been living off me. How will you survive now?
Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign later. Please leave my stuff until the movers come to pick it up.
Nobody's going to take your stuff.
Kenneth sneered.
You'll definitely regret divorcing a high-earning, handsome guy like me. A kind husband who lets you be a housewife with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world, right? That's right. You've been living in luxury on Dad's money till now. You'll struggle from here on.
While I packed clothes into my suitcase, Kenneth and Matthew kept talking endlessly behind me. Honestly, I envy Kenneth's ability to overestimate himself so much. When we were dating, I saw this part of him as confident and shining.
You'll just go back to your parents, right? Say hi to your pensioner mom for me. You two will be heading straight to poverty. Matthew, I bet they'll end up on TANF soon.
Matthew laughed at Kenneth's prediction.
They already reek of poverty, but with Grandma, it'll be the ultimate. The funeral the other day was nothing special. It smelled like poverty. I thought so too. Like a poor family's funeral. I want a lavish one, Matthew. Got it, Dad. But for Dad, who works at a big company, and me, attending a prestigious university, poverty is a different world.
Their endless comments infuriated me, but realizing it was pointless to respond, I let it all go. After returning home and explaining everything to Mom, she lowered her voice. At the funeral, seeing Kenneth and Matthew, I felt something wasn't right, but I thought it's not good to interfere too much in my daughter's household and kept silent. I was too preoccupied with Dad's care. I'm sorry for barging in like this. It's okay. I've been lonely without you. Why don't you stay here? Thanks. But once I get my job on track, I plan to move to an apartment. Mom's concern was comforting, but living with her might make me too dependent. Living nearby and visiting occasionally would be the right balance. Yes, Kenneth and Matthew mocked me as unemployed, but in fact, I've been working from home. It all started with the budget recipes I posted on my blog. After receiving many positive comments, I boldly launched a cooking site and shared my recipes, which quickly gained readers and internet fame. Soon after, an editor from a major publisher approached me, and now I'm gradually preparing to publish a cookbook. Thanks to this, I had no time to dwell on the divorce, and days flew by. One day, my phone rang insistently. I paused, stirring the ingredients in the pan, and answered the phone. Hello?
Hey, what's this about a deposit for the divorce trial?
I sighed, knowing it was about that. You and Matthew hurled endless abuse at me.
Oh, I thought, never mind.
Relief in his voice, Kenneth continued.
I didn't cheat or anything, you know? What? Did you record me and Matthew? Your memory alone won't cut it.
I've noted everything in my diary.
Try and claim it if you can. Really, poor people and their obsession with money. You reek of frugality. If you think you can get a deposit for the divorce trial, go ahead.
After his outburst, Kenneth hung up. I finished cooking and visited a detective agency, requesting an investigation into Kenneth's background. Soon, his affair with a subordinate was uncovered. The day after sending the 2-shot photos and investigation report to his company, Kenneth contacted me again.
You, spreading this at work is low. The angry manager reported it to the higher-ups, and now I'm fired.
Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she? It's your fault for cheating, knowing they're strict about such matters. I continued laughing. But you shouldn't have any trouble, right? With all the saving you did, you must have plenty of savings. Aren't you and Matthew living luxuriously?
Matthew moved into a dormitory this spring because commuting was tough. Damn. I have prepaid dorm fees and apartment loans. My savings? Drained by that woman. She was two-timing me with a younger guy.
Sounds tough for you, but it's none of my concern. Oh, and about the divorce trial deposit? I'll also take half the value of the apartment for distribution of property. When the invoice arrives, please transfer the full amount to my account. Kenneth was yelling on the other side, but I hung up without a care. One day, while returning from shopping in town, I bumped into Matthew. Dressed in his usual flashy fashion, with piercings all over his face, and his attention-grabbing hairstyle, he was easy to spot from a distance. Seeing me, Matthew raised his hand in greeting.
Hey, heard you're getting TANF.
I looked puzzled. Huh? Who are you mistaking me for?
Don't put on airs,
Matthew said, smirking.
It's obvious where an unemployed old lady like you would end up. If you had just obediently followed me and Dad, you'd still be living a comfortable life. It's pathetic, really.
Angry, I couldn't help but retort. Receiving TANF is a citizen's right. Any one of us could need it someday, due to illness or an accident. It's wrong to look down on that.
Yeah. So you're saying you're receiving it too?
Matthew said, dismissing me with a smirk and pointing his finger at me.
Listen, you and I are estranged. Don't come crying to me for money. Remember that.
As I opened my mouth to reply, he turned his back and disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, conscious of the stares of passers-by, shaking my shoulders. I couldn't help but laugh. It was just too ridiculous. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. A few days later, I woke up and checked my phone to find an unbelievable number of missed calls from Matthew. Reluctantly, I called back, and Matthew shouted at me furiously.
You deceived me, old woman.
What are you talking about?
I heard from a cousin. You got 3 high-rise apartments from Grandpa's inheritance and are living a carefree life. Hiding that and getting a divorce is cowardly.
That's my personal asset. Why should I have to tell you or Kenneth?
It's joint property. You should have done a distribution of property with Dad during the divorce.
Unfortunately, it became mine after the divorce procedures, so I can't give it to Kenneth. Officially, I knew from Dad's will that it would be mine, but I delayed the procedures until after the divorce because I didn't want to share it with Kenneth. Then Matthew shouted in frustration.
A rich woman like you getting TANF? I'll report you to the authorities right now.
Feel free. It's not me, but Kenneth who's receiving it. Matthew fell silent.
What?
I told you last time, it's not me. I explained as if speaking to a child. Honestly, even without the inheritance, I can live well. I have income from the cooking site and book sales I started in secret, but Kenneth, after spending all his money on his affair, had lots of payments piling up and was borrowing heavily. When his affair was discovered and he was fired, his income stopped. Are you listening?
Dad's on TANF? No way.
Ah! I pulled the phone away from my ear as Matthew screamed. Waiting for him to calm down, I continued. You really didn't know anything. He's too proud to tell his son. According to relatives he begged money from, he's behind on his apartment rent, facing eviction, and now stays at home all day in an old apartment. If you're worried, why don't you contact him? There was silence on the other side for a while. Then Matthew said resentfully,
You're cold-hearted. After all Dad did for you, you have no intention of repaying the favor. If you have money, you should give some to Dad.
Why should I? Ever since our marriage, it's been nothing but unpleasant memories, I don't feel indebted, I stated coldly. If you're so concerned, why don't you, his son, lend him money? You're working part-time after all.
I don't have savings. The part-time pay goes to, hanging out with friends and stuff.
Matthew suddenly became evasive, and I smirked. You've been living quite lavishly for a student. Borrowing money to hang out at clubs is not a good idea.
How do you know that?
The other day in town, I saw you from across the street. After we parted, you met up with a girl at a club and entered a brand store arm in arm. Also, a club membership card was left at the house, and using my credit card for shopping without my permission is out of the question. Matthew stammered in response.
That's unfair. You got high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Why don't I or Dad get a share? This is discrimination.
Yeah. The credit card bill will be sent soon. Make sure you pay it. Before I could finish, the call was disconnected. Sighing, I ended the call too. Just when I thought it was all over, a few months later, Kenneth and Matthew showed up at my parents' house without any notice. The doorbell rang incessantly, and when I answered, it was the two of them. Expecting they came to borrow money, I let them into the house to avoid causing a disturbance in the neighborhood. Kenneth and Matthew, who until recently were so stylish, now appeared drastically changed, wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty trousers, their eyes lifeless and gaunt. But they still had the energy to be sarcastic. Entering the living room, Kenneth looked around and sneered with a half-smile.
Same old house, huh? Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments and rebuild this place? Do something nice for Mom, living miserably on her pension.
This is Dad's house, and we like it this way. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back? You're past the deadline. Kevin lifted his chin arrogantly and said,
Hannah, I'll forgive you now, so let's remarry.
What?
You started a cooking site, right? If you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work, so come back. Such a generous dad, forgiving the wife who abandoned her husband and child. So Mom, why not live with Dad again? Living with just two women must be insecure.
Stunned, I was speechless. After a moment, intense anger welled up inside me. Don't joke with me. How much more do you plan to ridicule me? Furious, I yelled at the astonished Kenneth and Matthew. After treating me like nothing more than a housewife, hurling abuse, not providing proper living expenses, and then driving me out? Now you want me back just because you found out I inherited high-rise apartments? No way.
What? You're going to abandon us? Rich people really are stingy. Knowing we're struggling with money and still demanding payment, you're heartless. You were poor yourself until recently. Don't get cocky.
In the midst of the argument, Mom returned from shopping. Kenneth and Matthew immediately started buttering her up.
Please, lend us the money. We'll probably pay it back. Besides, isn't it unfair that only Hannah gets Grandpa's inheritance? Give me one of the high-rise apartments, too. Hi, Grandma. Long time no see. How have you been, Grandma? Please persuade Mom to remarry. Dad doesn't want to break up, but Mom is being stubborn.
Mom, surprised at first, changed her expression upon hearing their lines. She placed her echo bag on the fridge's floor and let out a deep sigh. So shameless, both of you.
What?
I'm telling you to have some shame. Startled by Mom's sudden loud voice, Kenneth and Matthew were understandably confused. Mom, usually calm, scolded them sharply. I've heard everything about the divorce from Hannah. I can't believe you have the nerve to show up here.
No. Hannah's exaggerating. You have to listen to our side, too. That's right, Grandma. Mom is quite the liar.
I remember how well you two behaved at my husband's funeral. Mom cut off Matthew's words and continued sternly. Arriving nonchalantly late to the funeral? not greeting me or the relatives, yawning through the service, and leaving before the coffin was sent off. And now you dare ask for his inheritance. Go back to sleep." She drove a taken aback Kenneth and Matthew to the front door and glared at them one last time. "You two are now strangers to us. Don't come here again. If you do, I'll call the police." Mom threw their shoes out the door, forcing them to leave in their socks, and immediately locked the front door. Kenneth, who had been avoiding paying me, was advised by his lawyer that a lawsuit would cost even more. Reluctantly, he finally transferred the money to my account. Even though Kenneth was fired from his job, he couldn't find another one, and the in-laws, hearing about their son's situation from relatives, stepped in to cover his debts. They visited my parents' house and apologized profusely for Kenneth's troubles. Later, Kenneth, having given up on finding a new job, returned to the countryside under the guise of helping with the family's farming. However, the story of our divorce spread through the village, leading to both children and elders pointing and laughing at Kenneth. "There's thrifty Uncle Kenneth."
Even with a degree from a good university and a job at a big company, what's the use if your wife leaves you for being too arrogant?
"The reason for his divorce from his first wife was also his reckless spending. He'll never change."
Being mocked by the villagers is embarrassing. Remarry me to show them."
I kept receiving such persistent messages from Kenneth, so I deleted his contact. His mistress, apparently no longer interested after the money ran out, had long since left him. I found her with the detective's help and made sure she paid the divorce trial's security deposit. I also made Matthew reimburse for the card he used without permission. Though enrolled in a prestigious university and on track to become an elite like his father, Matthew started skipping classes and playing around, leading to failing grades and eventual expulsion. His friends and girlfriends were concerned, but Matthew, in his arrogance, alienated them with his prideful remarks. He then had a major argument with Kenneth, saying,
"You're my son, yet you won't help repay the debt?"
Now they're estranged. Matthew lives alone in a small apartment, making ends meet with part-time jobs. Gone are the days of buying whatever he wanted and enduring sarcastic remarks despite high earnings. For me, it's a refreshing change. With my cooking side taking off and a book deal finalized, I moved to the top floor of the high-rise apartment inherited from Dad. Mom is still healthy at 73. The high-rise is close to our family home, so it's convenient if anything happens to her. I'm planning a surprise hot spring trip for Mom's upcoming birthday. Though my marriage was a failure, I want to continue having a good relationship with Mom.
Starting today, Mom is moving in with us. She's your mother-in-law, so take good care of her. Without any discussion or notice, my husband Huey brought home his mother, Isadora, announcing that she'd be living with us. To make matters worse, he had decided to turn my room into Isadora's room and dumped my belongings in the hallway. Where am I supposed to sleep now that my room's gone? "You've got the hallway, haven't you?" he said with a smirk as I turned to face him, incredulous. My name is Gina, and I'm a 38-year-old housewife. 5 years ago, I lost both my parents in a sudden car accident. Having no siblings or relatives, I found myself utterly alone. Craving the connection that comes with family, I was desperate to get married. That's when I met Huey, my current husband. His unwavering commitment, self-assuredness, and above all, his kindness drew me in. We dated, got married 3 months ago, and have been living together since. I used to work as a nurse, but overworked myself to the point of falling seriously ill. The diagnosis? Burnout from excessive work. When I told Huey, he said, "I've been worried you're pushing yourself too hard. Your health is what matters most. Let me handle work. Why don't you wait for me at home?" His concern for my well-being touched my heart. Though hesitant to leave my nursing career, I knew I could return any time thanks to my credentials. So I quit my job and decided to be a full-time housewife. But that's when things began to change between Huey and me. He started to restrict what I could do, saying it was for my own good. But it escalated. Before I knew it, he began to control every aspect of my life. Feeling obligated because he was supporting me financially, I adopted the mindset that I must obey him. Life went on like this for about 6 months, until one day, I returned home from grocery shopping to find Isadora there. I greeted her, thinking she had come for a visit. Heading to my room to put away the groceries, I found all my belongings dumped in the hallway. Confused, I stood there until Huey came to explain. My in-laws divorced when my husband was little, and he was raised by Isadora, his mom. He hadn't seen his father in years and was very attached to Isadora. For quite some time, he'd been planning to have her move in with us, unbeknownst to me. I was stunned to hear that these plans had already been in motion. Just then, my husband dropped another bombshell. Mom has been doing everything by herself for years. She's getting up there in age, and I want to make her life easier. So, starting tomorrow, make food for 3 people, okay? Take care of all the household chores, and don't bother Mom with them. Got it? Before I could fully understand what he was saying, he added unapologetically that since there's no room for Isadora in this house, she'll be using my room, and my belongings were tossed into the hallway because they were in the way. When I asked where I would sleep, both my husband and Isadora just laughed. Saying there was no other place but the hallway. As crazy and unfair as this sounded, my mind quickly became foggy, filled with thoughts that I should fully support this and take care of Isadora. I accepted my husband's ridiculous proposal, saying, "All right, I understand. Let's get along starting today." After all, I owe everything to my husband, and it's only natural to extend gratitude to Isadora who raised him. I was enthusiastic about meeting their demands. Living with Isadora, both she and my husband began to criticize every little thing I did. "You're terrible at washing dishes. Are you really that stupid? Today's meal is too salty. Are you trying to kill us?" I became the target of their verbal abuse. So there I was, mentally and physically drained, ultimately spending my nights sleeping in the hallway. I didn't recognize the absurdity of my situation. Whenever I felt tired, I blamed myself for not doing enough and obediently went on with my day. Then one winter day, Isadora ordered me to clean every corner of the house and prepare a dinner worthy of a luxury hotel for someone special she was bringing home. I spent the day scouring the house and shopping for ingredients, frantically researching recipes to create an array of lavish dishes. Once the meal was ready, I was told to stay in the hallway so as not to bother the guests. I complied without question, making sure to stay out of sight. From the laughter that occasionally leaked from the living room, I gathered that Isadora's guest was her current boyfriend. As the night wore on, I heard that the guest would be staying overnight. Isabella told me to wait in the kitchen, adding, "Gina, if Louis finds out you sleep in the hallway, he'll be shocked. It's not a good look. Could you just sleep in the kitchen tonight, okay?" I was used to listening to my husband, so I went to check with him. He seemed to be in a bad mood from work and yelled, "Don't come in here for every little thing. I don't want to see your face," before hitting me. Being hit was nothing new, so I left quickly to avoid making him angrier. Since I couldn't confirm where to sleep with my husband, I decided to sleep in the hallway as usual. Early in the morning, I was awakened by a surprised male voice and looked up to see a man staring down at me. I didn't see his face yesterday, but it's probably Louis, Isadora's boyfriend. "What are you doing here? Do you sleep in this house?" Caught off guard, I told him the truth. I'm Huey's wife and usually sleep in the hallway. Seeing my nonchalant attitude towards the situation, Louis paused, then asked for my contact information. When I told him I didn't have a cell phone because my husband manages it, he suggested meeting at a nearby cafe when the sun comes up. He asked me to come secretly, without telling my husband or Isadora. His serious gaze convinced me to agree. Later, Lewis went home, seen off by Isadora and my husband. As the sun rose, I told my family I was going grocery shopping and headed to the cafe where Lewis was already waiting. We went inside. While waiting for our drinks, Lewis said, "Actually, I've invited another person today." Shortly after, a woman he knows arrives. "Nice to meet you. I'm Eileen. I've known Lewis for a long time." Eileen was an excellent listener, and we had a lively chat. It had been a while since I talked to someone other than my husband and Isadora. I realized I had almost forgotten how to communicate, and I had a great time. On the way home, Eileen, sensing something was off, kindly asked me about my life. I told her the truth, and she invited me for tea again the next day. I agreed. For several days, our morning tea and casual chats continued. As I spoke to Eileen in the cafe, I started to feel something was wrong with my current life. I became emotional during our talks. It was then that I finally realized my current environment was unjust. Eileen softly smiled, gently wiping away my tears with a handkerchief. It turns out Eileen is a mental health professional. Lewis had noticed something was off and asked her to come to listen. Eileen explained that if she had immediately pointed out that my husband and Isadora were the issue, I might have closed off. So she took the time to support me, helping me slowly realize what was going on. "At first, I listened to you because it was a job required, but now it's different. I want to help Gina as a friend. If Gina wants our help, we're here, always ready to lend a hand." Hearing these warm words, I can't stop the tears from flowing. Eileen gently rubs my back as I continue to cry uncontrollably. When I finally stop crying, it's time to part ways with Eileen and head home. As we say goodbye, she assures me, "We're always on your side." On the way home, my clouded thoughts finally clear, filling me with a newfound sense of relief. That night, when my husband starts complaining about my cooking again, for the first time, I retort, "If it's too bland for you, add your own seasoning." My husband is momentarily surprised, but quickly turns red with rage. "How dare you speak to me like that?" he shouts. Isadora, who's already there, starts to get angry as well, and both she and my husband yell, "I want a divorce. Get out of this house now." Thinking that it might be a good thing for them to kick me out, I simply nod my head as usual. While packing, my husband orders me to be ready for a shower and make the next meal more delicious. To all of this, I reply as always, "It's because I'm a bad wife," and finish packing my minimal belongings. My husband, annoyed that things didn't go his way, lets out a loud sigh and grabs a beer from the kitchen. Ignoring him, I take my bags to the front door. Isadora follows me, letting out an obvious sigh. "If you're really sorry, I might forgive you. Now go do the dishes." "No, I'm leaving because my husband told me to." Upon hearing this, Isadora goes to call my beer-drinking husband. Ignoring them both, I walk out of the house and into the waiting taxi, putting distance between myself and that home. Inside the taxi, I wonder why I'd ever listened to such people. Maybe unconsciously, I didn't want to sever family ties. Realizing that I had been enduring my husband and Isadora's unreasonable demands and verbal abuse for this reason makes me firmly decide once again that I will divorce for my own freedom. Given the toxicity I had endured through the divorce, I had already begun preparations to claim financial compensation. Along with the divorce papers, I sent an invoice. Ever since I left the house, my phone was bombarded with calls and texts from my husband and Isadora, all of which I ignored. Unreachable and furious after reviewing the divorce papers and bills, my husband decided to take legal action against me. I got a notice from the court saying that he had filed a lawsuit against me. I was shaken for a moment, but then thought, well, it figures with those people, and began preparing my case. Thanks to Eileen's advice, I had a strong case. I presented as evidence the recordings I had made of my husband's abusive language before leaving the house, as well as photos of injuries he had inflicted on me, and medical reports that backed them up. The evidence worked in my favor, and I won the case. The court ordered him to grant the divorce and pay tens of thousands in compensation. Finally, I gained a peaceful, humane life. Afterward, Eileen told me that I was oblivious to it because I was so emotionally dependent on my ex-husband, but the yelling from him and Isadora was heard by the neighbors. There were already rumors that I was perhaps being abused, or at least mistreated. My departure confirmed their suspicions, and the rumors spread like wildfire. I heard they're now seen as the family that tormented their wife. Isadora and Louis broke up right after. It seems they stayed together while I was there because they feared it might hurt me if they separated. Isadora was apparently devastated, clinging to Louis's feet and crying, but he firmly told her, "I can't be with someone who doesn't value their son's wife and family. I can't imagine a future with someone who can't feel gratitude for the people close to them." Since I left the house, my husband was forced to take care of household chores, something he was never good at. He and Isadora seemed to be constantly arguing about dividing up the tasks. He used to relieve his work stress by taking it out on me, but with me gone, he turned to alcohol for relief. During our legal proceedings, his drinking increased significantly. When he drank, he would become violent, and he became even more aggressive, now even towards Isadora. One day, he went to work still under the influence and caused some trouble. This led to disciplinary action, and he lost his job. Now he seems to be doing tough physical labor to make ends meet. Fortunately, I had received the settlement money in a lump sum, so I wasn't affected by his downfall. After giving heartfelt thank yous to Eileen and Louis, who had helped me, I moved far away and started a new life. Even though Eileen and I now live farther apart, we continue to deepen our friendship, meeting for coffee and taking trips together. Though this was an awful experience, and I didn't gain a family, I found something equally valuable: true friendship. I've returned to nursing, feeling even more fulfilled than before as I work diligently for my patients. And I've tried starting new things that I've always been interested in, like marathons and swimming. I'm enjoying my days, free and uncontrolled by anyone, filled with fun and excitement.